I wasn't fired. That would have taken guts. No, they restructured. Quietly deleted my name from the Tervana acquisition deck, wiped me off the bonus list, and handed my files to two fresh Ivy League grads who couldn't tell. The announcement didn't even mention me. Just a Friday memo BCC'd to half the floor. To subject line, Q4 Alignment Initiative. Workforce Streamlining Risks. The only person who looked me in the eye was Nate, a junior analyst who still wore his visitor badge 3 weeks into onboarding. He crept over, voice cracking like a scared kid. "Do you want help packing your things?" I smiled just enough to be polite. "No, but thank you." Packing didn't take long. I travel light. A photo of Max, my golden retriever, a ficus I'd nursed back from frostbite, a mug that said Coral plus Alt plus defeat, and a passive-aggressive sticky note from my old boss that said, "You're too careful to be creative." That one went straight into the recycling. Before I left, I sat down at my terminal one last time. No drama, no tears, just muscle memory. My fingers hovered over the keys like I was about to play a sonata. I opened the system window, typed one line: clean, efficient. Then I clicked save. Nobody noticed. They never do with people like me. The ones who fix everything behind the scenes, the ones who bleed quietly. The office was quiet, heavy, like everyone could sense something permanent was shifting. Even the printer seemed to hold its breath. I moved slow, like every file might explode if I touched it wrong. People floated past me like ghosts' eyes on the floor. No one said a word. I picked up my nameplate, Evelyn Brooks, Senior Data Integration Lead, and dropped it into the box like it weighed nothing. But it did. It weighed 12 years. 12 years of holding things together with duct tape, caffeine, and grace. So someone else could stand on stage, say transformation, and pretend they knew what it meant. I didn't burn the place down, but I made sure they'd feel the cold. Flashbacks don't wait for permission. They just show up loud and vivid like unpaid invoices. I remembered fixing a multi-million-dollar spreadsheet error 10 minutes before a board call, one hand juggling a turkey sandwich, the other typing hot fix code like my life depended on it. Or the night I rewrote an entire section of the Horizon Tech merger contract after my then-manager, Tom, forgot to include a compliance clause. He accepted a bonus and a golf trip in Palm Springs for his attention to detail. The thing about loyalty, no one notices until you stop bleeding for them. Nate hovered again near my office door. Small frame, nervous shoulders, clutching a monster can like it was mace. "I can, help you carry that," he offered, voice cracking on the word help. I looked up. For a second, I said nothing. Just studied his wide-eyed concern like I was deciding whether to warn him or let him figure it out on his own. Then I softened just enough. "No, but thank you." He nodded too many times and shuffled backward like he'd just disarmed a landmine. I turned back to my box. Next in went the curl plus alt plus defeat mug. Someone gave me that as a joke. It didn't feel like one anymore. I left the award plaques behind. Let the interns fight over those. They were meaningless, now plastic tributes to years of invisible labor. My terminal screen blinked softly, like it still wanted to talk. So I sat down one last time. No music, no dramatic sigh, just a clean login. I opened the system interface and navigated without pause. My fingers knew the way. They always had. This wasn't sabotage. I wasn't here to destroy anything, just to leave a fingerprint. I typed in short, deliberate bursts, paused once, reread the string, changed a single character. No one noticed. No alarm rang. On the surface, it was nothing. Harmless. But the kind of nothing that becomes everything under the right pressure. I logged out, stood up, box in hand, past the HR girl faking a scroll on her phone, past Dylan's office, where laughter slipped through the cracks like rot. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. I didn't cry, never my style, but something shifted behind my eyes. A quiet break. Not anger, not sadness, just a click. Clean, mechanical, like a circuit closing or a trap, resetting. Before Crestwell Partners had a pipeline, it had me Evelyn Brooks a secondhand Dell and a whiteboard so stained with half-erased ideas, you'd think it had ghosts. The execs were too busy sipping craft cocktails at digital strategy summits to realize their billion-dollar acquisitions were duct-taped together with Excel sheets and blind faith. So I built something better, quietly, alone, between 10 p.m. takeout containers and 2 a.m. Slack pings from directors who couldn't tell the difference between EBITDA and a latte order. What I created wasn't flashy. No LinkedIn buzzwords, no TechCrunch write-up. Just a living framework, a spine of contracts, valuation triggers compliance flags, and regulatory checkpoints that could track an acquisition from rumor to ribbon cutting without losing a single zero. The system didn't just store information, it understood it. I called it the spine. And like any real spine, it held everything up while the suits strutted around like their heads weren't even attached to anything beneath the jawline. Over time, every division touched it. Strategy, risk, legal, even IT, once they stopped pretending their outdated SharePoint clone was cutting it. But only I ever saw the whole blueprint. That's because I was the blueprint. When legal found out I'd quietly filed a provisional patent under my name, they came after me like Armani-clad wolves. Said it was company property since I'd built it on their systems on their time. Keep the patent or keep the job, they said. Couldn't have both. So for a while, I kept the job. But I left myself a note, 5 layers deep inside the access protocol. On the surface, just a benign line of metadata about node redundancy fallback. But under the right trigger, it became something else entirely, not a bomb. A trap door. I wasn't a saboteur. I was an archivist. I didn't destroy bridges. I documented who built them wrong and made sure the collapse had a name. There was one string of code, one forgotten piece of logic. It blinked for half a second during my last session. If user unfriendly approved, admins, and trigger, key, Brooks, 42X, freeze, nodes. Most would have thought it expired. Just a legacy failover toggle. But I knew better. I knew every inch of that system, not because I wrote it, but because I raised it, nursed it through crashes, debugged it in my car during the Crestwell-Brandlin merger, skipped my sister's wedding rehearsal to rewrite its access matrix. And every time someone else took the credit, I stayed quiet. Because playing the long game means you hold the knife, but never swing first. Crestwell didn't just run on my code. It ran on me. It was my code. Not just lines and logic mine. And now, a silent thread buried deep inside the system had shifted. A domino I placed years ago. Finally tilted. All it needed was pressure. A little arrogance. One careless shove. Dylan delivered it effortlessly. I bit into a cold ham and mustard sandwich as his spray-tanned face filled my TV screen. CNBC had Crestwell Tervana acquisition plastered across the bottom in bold. Right underneath it, the visionaries behind the deal. Like it meant something. Dylan was in the middle of one of his over-rehearsed victory laps arms, flailing like he was trying to land a plane in high winds. We knew from day one that integrating predictive valuation logic into our deal stream would be the game changer, he said. I chewed slowly. Predictive valuation logic. That was my phrase. Word for word. I'd said it in a Q2 strategy session 6 months ago. Dylan had nodded politely at the time. The kind of nod that says, I don't get it, but I'll pretend I do. Now here he was using it like a campaign slogan. Behind him, a digital slide showed the deal flow timeline. I didn't need to squint. The formatting mine, the color coding mine, the labeling schema, definitely mine. Even the logic bubbles looked exactly like the ones I created when Ite told me Visio couldn't support that level of granularity. I swallowed. It tasted like betrayal and stale rye. My phone buzzed. Encrypted message. Jules. They really screwed you. No emojis, no punctuation, just truth. Raw and unfiltered. I didn't reply. And if you're curious what happened when they tried to rebuild without me, well, you'll want to be here for part 2. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I promise the next chapter. It's anything but quiet. Instead, I walked to my home office, a quiet windowless room with blackout curtains and the lingering scent of jasmine from a forgotten diffuser. My sanctuary. I booted up my old personal terminal. The screen lit up like an obedient soldier waiting for orders. No frills, no cloud integrations, just raw access. I typed SSH Evelyn I archive a node 1 password. Accepted. My private server interface came online, black background, green terminal text, no distractions, timestamps, dependency logs, system vitals, the digital bones of the company. I scanned for the one I knew would be there. Found it. Pipeline integrity log. Last verified 308 days ago, I moved the cursor. Fingers steady, intent crystal clear. Then I typed touch, verify, ID a heartbeat. EI, enter. A new line blinked into place beneath it. Manual override key received user Brooks SAM42X. I nodded. One heartbeat reconnected. One pressure point engaged. No one at Crestwell even knew it was pulsing again. But I did. Touch, verify, heartbeat. ETH, then verify, heartbeat.ha. Another line blinked onto the screen. Manual override key received. User, Brooks, 42X. I nodded once. Then I typed again, slow, steady, precise. Update, integrity, timestamp center. Timestamp, updated. Node integrity confirmed. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle. There were no fireworks, no alarms, no blinking red warnings. Just a gentle shift in gravity, subtle and powerful. The heartbeat had been touched. The system would now read my name again, regardless of whether I was on payroll. And if someone, without the right clearance, came nosing around, well, I logged out, closed the lid of my terminal. In the living room, Dylan's voice echoed from the television. He was laughing, fielding some softball question from a finance show host who probably couldn't tell an API from an IPA. He actually winked at the camera. I turned it off, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, stood there in the middle of the room, sipping in silence. No rage, no drama, but something cold had clicked into place inside my chest, like steel setting in concrete, permanent, unyielding. They wanted to erase my name and replace it with Dylan's. Fine. Let them stand on the throne they built with my code. Because I had just pressed the first key. At precisely 10:37 a.m. Eastern, the Crestwell Tervana pipeline dashboard froze. No warning, no error codes, just a full-body lockup. A $6 billion digital bloodstream dead on arrival. In conference room C, the one with the $8,000 espresso machine no one knew how to use, senior partners sat frozen tapping their iPads like they were radioactive. "Where's the Tervana compliance packet?" someone barked. It was here this morning, another muttered fingers jabbing uselessly at a grayed-out screen. Now, gone. And gone was a generous term. Every valuation projection, every term sheet draft, every milestone, flag risk score, cross-departmental update erased from surface view. No matter how many times IT tried rebooting, refreshing, or escalating, every login attempt was met with the same cheerful message, node access restricted. Insufficient credentials. Meanwhile, in my 2-bedroom rental in Clifton, I was folding towels. Not in some Hollywood fury, no storm cloud soundtrack, just carefully corner-to-corner thirds like my grandmother taught me. Jasmine still lingered in the air from last night's diffuser. I hadn't touched my phone since issuing the command. Didn't need to, because back at Crestwell, panic was blooming like mold behind fresh drywall. And I had only just begun. Dylan stormed into the DevOps war room, wearing a Crestwell quarter zip and the exact look of a man who had just realized too late that he was not the guy. "What the hell is going on?" he barked. Lena from InfoSec looked up from her terminal eyes, wide hair pulled back in a rushed knot that hadn't existed 9 minutes ago. "You're not going to like it." On the main monitor, my name Brooks. Evelyn blinked in red across the user logs. Access event, Brooks, 4EX. Timestamp, 9 minutes ago. Impossible! Dylan snapped. Her credentials were revoked last week. Exactly, Lena said. That's probably why the system accepted the trigger. He blinked. What? It wasn't a login. It was a signature. The pipeline logic still treats her as a root authority. Legacy override access. What the hell does that even mean? It means, Lena said, voice flat, the system never stopped trusting her. It stopped trusting you. Silence. Someone near the back muttered, "We can't access anything from last quarter. None of the Tervana scenario models are loading. PE valuation ladders are blank." Another chimed in, "Even the Luxora term sheets are just gone." "I have a board update in 20 minutes," someone else added, voice rising. "They'll crucify us." Meanwhile, downstairs legal and risk were already unraveling. A junior compliance officer had buried her face in a salad and started crying. Another analyst sprinted down the hall clutching a manila folder like it held the cure for a terminal illness. The CEO locked in his office, staring at a frozen pipeline dashboard with the kind of dazed horror normally reserved for MRIs and divorce attorneys. He clicked the override button 5 times. Nothing. Then the tag updated itself. Primary registry, lock trigger source, Brooks, 42X. He stared at the screen. 3 slow seconds. Then whispered to no one in particular, "Find her." But I wasn't hiding. I was home pairing socks, stripes with stripes, heels aligned, cotton folded into calm. It was laundry day. Nothing cinematic, no storm clouds, just order. They'd had plenty of warnings. I'd just spoken a different language, the kind written in permissions protocols and conditional logic. The emergency meeting was called at exactly 11:04 a.m. By 11:07, half the room was already sweating through their dress shirts, clutching legal pads like life preservers. Conference room Omega, normally reserved for fourth quarter earnings, prep now looked like a bunker on fire. The CEO stood at the head of the table, eyes bloodshot, tie, crooked hands, trembling. "We are 10 days out from finalizing the Tervana acquisition," he said slowly. "Our investors expect deliverables. And our forecast models," he paused, "frozen. Someone explain to me," the CEO growled, rubbing his temples. "What the hell is happening?" Lynn, still clinging to the belief that a firm handshake and a TED Talk smile could substitute for competence, leaned forward. "It's sabotage," he declared, waving his hand, like that word alone could solve something. "It's Evelyn. She must have installed a kill switch or a hidden virus. She didn't install anything. Snapped a woman from legal. We already combed the endpoint access logs. There's no breach, no malware, no unauthorized packages after her departure. She triggered something." Dylan barked, his face flushed. "Look at the logs. Her name is all over them." "And that's the issue," came a steady voice from the corner. Frank Kim, the only IT manager who'd been at Crestwell longer than me. He'd started 3 months before I arrived, survived 6 CTOs, 3 rebrands, and 1 office rat infestation. Frank walked to the front of the room and pulled up an old system map on the projector. The edges were blurry from compression. The file name in the corner still read, E. Brooks Vi3 Arch M Internal Final. Final? Revise to PG PTX. He pointed to a dim module near the base of the diagram, something labeled Access Delegation Failsafe. "This right here," Frank said. "That's legacy logic, from the earliest version of the spine. Evelyn wrote it herself. I remember." "Why didn't anyone remove it?" Dylan snapped. Frank shrugged. "Because nobody understood it. We migrated to the new UI dashboards, but this node, it's hard-coded. Deep. You rip it out, you risk corrupting every live transaction we've got." Silence rippled through the room. Then someone from Risk whispered, "Are those her initials?" Everyone turned toward the screen. In the bottom right corner of the diagram, in faint gray letters, E.B. Evelyn Brooks. The CEO leaned forward slowly, eyes narrowed like the diagram was mocking him. "Are you telling me that our entire infrastructure, this whole platform we've built over the last 7 years, is still running on her code?" Frank gave a one-shouldered shrug. "Some parts? Yeah, it still works. Nobody ever replaced the spine. They just painted over it. Dylan looked like he wanted to throw a chair. She's not even authorized anymore. Frank nodded toward the screen. The system doesn't care about HR paperwork. It runs on code, and the code still thinks she's the architect. Meanwhile, back in Cincinnati, I sat on my balcony with a mug of black coffee. The morning sun warmed my legs as I watched two pigeons fight over a crust of bread on the sidewalk. Let them panic. The system already remembered who built it. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even smiling. I just took a slow sip of my coffee, checked the breeze coming off the trees behind my apartment, and leaned back in my chair. Let them spiral. Dylan was probably yelling. Legal was likely scrambling to draft apology memos in triplicate. Risk and compliance were taping together retroactive fixes like Band-Aids over a leak in a dam. But none of that changed the truth. I built it. They never bothered to understand what they were standing on. Now the cracks were showing. Loudly. At exactly 6:42 p.m., just as I sat down with a microwaved bowl of tomato soup and the last half of a grilled cheese sandwich, my phone buzzed. New York area code. I didn't answer the first ring or the second. Let it marinate. On the third, I picked up. No hello. Just silence. Then came a voice. I recognized the same voice that used to echo through town halls and investor calls. Evelyn, the CEO, said, his tone buttered with fake warmth and corporate regret. We're reaching out to reconnect. I didn't say a word. There's been a small hiccup with the system, he continued, and, well, we'd appreciate your insight. Deeply. Still nothing from me. We, understand that some of the older infrastructure is behaving unpredictably, he mumbled, shaping the words like soap that kept slipping from his grip. No one's accusing you of anything, he added quickly. We know you've always acted in Crestwell's best interest. And hypothetically, if you were open to consulting, even just temporarily, we'd be willing to offer a very competitive rate. He handed the phone off. Legal jumped in, speaking fast. Of course, Evelyn, the arrangement would protect all parties. Full indemnification. No admission of fault. Remote only. Starting at $600 an hour, escalating as needed. I finally spoke. Calm. Controlled. Was I useful again? There was a pause. Then a forced chuckle. Of course. Your institutional knowledge is irreplaceable. Interesting, I murmured. I didn't yell. I didn't demand back pay or ask who was listening on mute. I just let them talk. Let them spin themselves into polite desperation, pretending to hold the wheel. When they finally asked if I would accept the terms, I gave them 5 words. I'll think about it. Goodbye. Click. Back in the war room, Legal stared at the dial tone like it might lunge. She hung up. Someone whispered. The CEO just stared at the table. Dylan. He punched a chair. She's bluffing, he muttered. She has to help us. She's not going to tank her own career over what Frank from IT spoke softly. Respect, he said. And being erased? Respect. Dignity. Being erased from a deal I built with my bare hands. No one said a word after Frank spoke, because they knew I wasn't bluffing. I was calculating, and I wasn't done. Back in my apartment, I pulled out my old ThinkPad, the one I hadn't touched in years. It had been tucked away under a folded blanket in the back of my closet, stored like a loaded weapon. It took its time booting up, screen blinking in slow pulses, like it was waking from a coma. Inside was the original test environment. For the spine's earliest versions, the raw builds still full of quirks and fingerprints. The kind of thing no one at Crestwell had seen or bothered to preserve. I connected to my private archive. A soft hum filled the room as scripts began to load one after the other. I leaned forward, fingers hovering above the keys. My expression still. Focused. They thought this had been about flipping a switch. But I hadn't just built a lock. I'd designed a pressure valve. And someone, probably Dylan, had just cranked the setting from contained to exposed. At 2:11 a.m., while most of Crestwell was either sleeping or panic scrolling through spreadsheets lit by caffeine and dread, I ran the script. No drama, no sparks, no cinematic explosion, just a quiet unraveling. The file was labeled plainly, deadweight, is cleanse. It wasn't destructive. Not in the Hollywood sense. No deletions, no damage. Just a slow, deliberate decoupling of every orphan node, every deprecated auth string, every ghost credential still echoing with my digital signature. What remained was elegant, a skeleton of the system hollowed gently from the inside. I hit run. Across Crestwell's network, substructures began severing from core logic. Quietly, naturally, like lizards dropping tails. At 8:03 a.m., Dylan got the first push alert: Q3 fund flow models missing keynotes. IR queries unresolved. By 10:00 a.m., investor calls had shifted from curious to confrontational. By noon, public confidence had dipped 6.4%. Slack channels exploded with ghost emojis and nervous gifs, but no one was laughing anymore. That afternoon, I got a message. Encrypted. From Jules. They're trying to rebuild the pipeline from scratch. It's not working. No one can trace the dependencies. Dylan's unraveling. The board's asking for backup systems that don't exist. I stared at the screen, then cracked my knuckles. I sent one reply a link. File name? Pipeline. Manual? Final. PDF subtitle. If you're not a moron. It included a full breakdown of the spine's architecture, layout, interdependencies, permission trees, protocol, inheritance, everything. And buried deep in Appendix D screenshots. Receipts, truth, logs, time-stamped comparisons. Dylan's admin key used off hours outside the usual range, authorized during sensitive deal windows. Then came the metadata edits, slipped quietly into the transaction logs, just enough to bump the internal valuation of Tervana upward by 14%. The same number Crestwell had floated to investors the week before. One document was even labeled, Override, Flag. True. Force. Projectable. Gain. It was fraud. Sloppy, greedy, rookie-level fraud. And of course, dressed up in just enough of my old syntax to look like something I might have authorized. Unless, of course, you were me. I didn't write an exposé, didn't call a journalist, didn't post it on Reddit. I just uploaded the packet screenshots, logs, cross-referenced permissions, the whole audit trail to a secure folder on my personal server. Then I attached read-only access to 12 anonymized emails belonging to compliance analysts I trusted to do their jobs. I didn't slam the door. I opened the trapdoor beneath them. Slowly, carefully, let gravity do the rest. When Jules replied a few hours later, "Oh my God, this is bad," like SEC bad, I didn't even respond. I was already 4 moves ahead. NPR mumbled in the background about market jitters and whispers of internal issues at Crestwell. I sipped my tea. For years, I'd been quiet, efficient, invisible. Now, I was something else entirely precise. The scream came at 9:06 a.m. It echoed off the 47th floor's floor-to-ceiling windows, like someone had just watched a train derail in real time. Who just locked the $6 billion pipeline? The CEO's voice cracked and ricocheted down the corridor. The framed quote by the elevator, "Adapt or die," rattled against the glass. Oh, the irony. 5 minutes earlier, the first SEC alert had landed in compliance's inbox. Then 2 more. Suspicious metadata changes tied to internal valuation shifts. Unregistered triggers linked to a former employee. One email came with a file. Subject line: If you're going to hang someone, bring your own rope. By 9:15, Dylan's badge access had been revoked. Security didn't even need to escort him out. He left on his own, glassy-eyed, muttering about context and intent. PR tried to spin it. Nobody bought it. Tervana's board called an emergency session. The merger was placed on hold, pending full audit and investigation into Crestwell's systems. The stock dipped. Then dove. Meanwhile, in HR, some poor intern tasked with clearing out my former desk opened the top drawer and found a yellow Post-it slapped to the back panel. Block letters. She outlived her usefulness. Funny. So did their infrastructure. Someone took a photo. It hit Twitter by lunch. viral by dinner. My name never trended. That was the point. The system had spoken, louder, clearer, and more decisively than I ever did. Back in Cincinnati, I wasn't watching the chaos unfold. I wasn't refreshing stock tickers or tracking Slack leaks from the war room. I was walking through Eden Park boots, crunching over the soft gravel of the Overlook Trail scarf wrapped high against the sharp bite of early autumn. The world moved on without fanfare. Dogs barked, joggers puffed past heads down, birds squabbled somewhere above me in the red gold canopy. Everything felt peaceful, normal. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket. I let it ring. Buzzed again, then a third time. I finally took it out and glanced at the screen. A calendar invite. Subject line, intro, call, Prosper Equity Group message. We heard you might be available. We'd like to talk infrastructure. Envision. On your terms, of course. I smiled. Not smug. Not even triumphant. Just enough. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. Didn't stop. Didn't slow down. And most importantly, I didn't look back. There wasn't anything behind me worth seeing anymore. They built their empire on the scaffolding of my work. On code, I wrote in silence. On nights, I skipped family dinners. Weekends, I gave up for emergency patches, deadlines I saved from collapse. And when the earth shifted beneath them, they acted surprised it crumbled. Let them. They'd never once asked where the fault lines were. As for me, I'd already started sketching new blueprints. Something leaner, smarter, quieter. Something that wouldn't carry someone else's nameplate while I did the heavy lifting. This time, my name would be etched into every string of logic, every signature line, every clause, buried 3 layers deep. Permanent, traceable, mine. I crossed the overlook path and paused for a moment by the stone railing. The wind caught the edge of my scarf. Below me, the city glinted under the weight of afternoon light glass and ambition wrapped in concrete. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. If you've ever been the quiet one holding it all together, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my place, because this story isn't just mine. It belongs to every one of us who's been overlooked, underestimated, or quietly erased. Your voice matters. I see you. And if my story made you feel a little stronger today, hit that like button and share it forward. Because the world doesn't need louder people. It needs the right ones to finally be heard.